العظيم الصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين المبعوث رحمة للعالمين شفيع المذنبين وحبيب قلوب الصادقين سيدنا ومولانا أبي القاسم محمد
اللهم صل على محمد
وعلى أهل بيته الأطيبين الأطهرين الهداة المهديين ورحمة الله على أعدائهم إلى قيام يوم الدين رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي أما بعد فقد قال الله عز وجل في القرآن المجيد بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قد أفلح المؤمنون الذين هم في صلاتهم خاشعون والذين هم عن اللغو معرضون والذين هم للزكاة فاعلون صلوا على محمد وعلى محمد
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Yesterday we began our discussion during these nights of Muharram with a question and a challenge for all of us, including myself, for all of us to be students and to be seekers and to be travelers on the same path, which is the path of discovering and then committing ourselves to the path of virtue, the path of righteousness, the path of salvation. Allah says in the Quran in Surah Al-Mu'minun, قَدْ أَفْلَحَ الْمُؤْمِنُونَ. Indeed, it is the faithful, the believers, the mu'minun, who are going to achieve success and salvation and righteousness and virtue. And all of those concepts are interrelated. It is the believers who are going to achieve the meaningful success and salvation that humanity seeks. And that is our goal, that is our purpose in life and our purpose in coming together during these nights. And so we introduced this discussion or this journey with a question that many people ask, and it comes to the mind sometimes without us even intending it to come. But there is a question that many of us have, and that is especially a relevant question when we live in a diverse society. Some of you may have had experiences where you were filled with that feeling of faith and that desire to benefit your fellow Muslim community. You wanted to buy a house, and so you said, you know what, I'm going to find myself a Muslim real estate agent. Or you want to buy a car, and you say that I'm going to go and I'm going to find a Muslim car dealer. Or some other area in your life, and you decide that you are going to give first preference to a Muslim because they are a member of your community, they are a member of your spiritual family, even if they are not a member of your physical family, and you want to do that honor towards them. And then you enter into that transaction, and it turns out that they did not have that same level of sincerity to you that you had towards them. And sometimes you may have experienced it, and many people have said it, I've heard it, that that's the last time that I give preference to a Muslim, because they didn't look out for me the way that I was looking out for them. No more give my business to the community. No more give preferential treatment to the Muslim. And so when you live in a diverse society, it's very easy to make that comparison and to say, this person is not Muslim, but they went out of their way to make me comfortable, to be fair to me, and even go above and beyond the standard of justice and fairness. And then there might be a Muslim who does not live up to that standard or seems to be wanting in one way or another. And when we see that, and you can't deny your experience, you can't deny your senses, your eyes, and your ears, then the question often comes, what should I do about my relationships? And how should I conceive of salvation and righteousness when I see that a good person in my interactions is not always a Muslim, and those who are Muslims are not always good people? In fact, in some Muslim countries, there is sort of wisdom on the street. That if you see somebody wearing a cap that indicates they come regularly to the masjid and they have a beard, then be on your guard. Because that person probably has that uniform in order to try to attract people and make them feel like they are in good hands. So if the person doesn't wear their religious affiliation on their street, then they may be good to you or they may not. But if they're wearing it on their street, then you have to be careful. And so, naturally, when you experience those different groups, the question comes. And it's a fair question. And I want to separate one part of the question. If you have a specific need, then you are entirely justified and, in fact, required to look for somebody who will be faithful to that trust. There is an incident in the time of our sixth Imam, Imam Ja'far as-Sadiq alayhi salatu wassalam. His son, Ismail alayhi salam, was burned by a Muslim in a business transaction. The son of our sixth Imam, Ismail, he gave a certain amount of capital as an investment to a believer and said that you purchase some merchandise, sell it, and we will split the profit. So there was a business transaction, a mubaraba. And Ismail had embarked in that transaction, and that person did not live up to the trust, ate the money, and disappeared. No merchandise, no principal, no profit. And the Imam heard Ismail praying to Allah that, "Oh Allah, I ask you to replace for me the capital that I lost." And the Imam said that, "Ismail, this is not a prayer that is going to be answered." He said, "Why not? Does not Allah guarantee our risk? Does not Allah tell us that He will give back what we have suffered through no fault of our own?" And the Imam said, "This was your own fault. Did you not know that that person had a reputation?" In the case of this particular incident, that person had a reputation of consuming alcohol and getting drunk. And so they were a fasiq, a sinful person. But regardless of the specific transgression, in one case it might be somebody who is careless in their accounting, in another case it might be somebody who is not honest, in another case it might be somebody who consumes alcohol. The bottom line is the Imam said that you had reason to know that this person is not worthy of your trust. Why did you entrust that person with your money in the first place? He said that, well, he was a believer. And I didn't want to listen to rumors. I wanted to trust a person because they are a believer. And the Imam replied that if you have a business proposition, then you must do your due diligence to make sure that that person is trustworthy. And if you say that I'm just going to give my business to a believer, then you have misused that blessing, that resource, that trust that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given you. That's not honoring somebody because of the label of Islam or because of the identity of being a believer or a Muslim. That is dishonoring a trust that Allah has given you that He wants you to use responsibly. And so if you do that, if you trust somebody because they have a Muslim name, or because they have a superficial Muslim identity, and then they abuse that trust, not only is it not something that is good, but even if you come to Allah and say, oh Allah, replace it for me, Allah will say no. If you abuse the trust that I have given you, if you abuse the resource that I have given you, then you don't deserve to ask me to give you that resource again so that you can squander it. So when it comes to needs that we have, if you need a lawyer to help you in a certain issue, then find a lawyer who is going to faithfully look after your interests and advocate for you and get you justice. If you decide that you are going to go after a label, a religious identity, without doing your due diligence, then in accordance with that principle given by Imam Ja'far Sadiq, you have not done a good deed, you have done an evil deed. And if you suffer, then even your dua to Allah is not going to be answered, because He had given you the ability to advocate for yourself in the best possible way. So that part of the question has a very clear answer. In your interactions, when you have a trust that has been given to you by Allah, your health, you need medical care, your civil or legal or business interests, and you need a lawyer, your financial interests, and you need a broker or an agent or somebody to help you in that affair, then you do your due diligence and find somebody who will look after that trust and be fair and be just. You don't look after just a superficial identity or a label or a name. That part of the question is relatively easy for us to answer. Sallallahu Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. The second part of the question is not so easy, which is it enough to be a good person without being religious? That is a separate question from the first. Because the first question is simply a matter of, who do I go to buy a car from? You buy a car from somebody who is going to give you a fair deal. If they're Muslim, great. If they're a blood relative, great. You've gotten your car, and you've done a kindness to a member of your family, you've done a kindness to a member of your community, you've checked more than one box, great. But if all of those cannot be met at once, then you look after your rights and your interests, because that is what Allah wants you to do. But does that mean then that goodness or righteousness is independent of religion? Or is goodness and righteousness inseparable from religion? To answer that question, we have to look at what is the Islamic conception of religion. There's two words that we need to very briefly explore. One is the word deen, and one is the word fitrah, as it is understood within the Islamic teaching and conception. Allah says in the Quran, فَأَقِمْ وَجْهَكَ لِلدِّينِ حَنِيفًا فِطْرَةَ اللَّهِ الَّتِي فَطَرَ النَّاسَ عَلَيْهَا. Keep your direction and your face firm in the path of deen. That is the fitrah which Allah has created people in accordance to. Both of those terms are difficult to translate into English. We often translate fitrah as nature or disposition, and we translate deen as religion. But deen is not religion, and that is why when the Quran says, "La ikraha fi deen," Allah is not saying that there is no compulsion in religion. Deen is a comprehensive meaning that incorporates the very direction of a person's life, from the innermost aspect to the most mundane and the most superficial aspect of your life. Everything about your direction in life and what you believe, what you say, what you do, what you feel, that is your deen. It is your beliefs. And we generally associate religion with beliefs. If you believe in God, then you are a theist. And if you do not believe in God, then you are an atheist. And if you believe in God and you believe in a particular religion or message or prophet, then you are a follower of the religion of that group or that prophet or that messenger. And generally we associate in common usage religion primarily with belief. But within the Quran and within the Islamic conception, deen incorporates belief. But then it shows itself in our actions, in our thoughts, in our feelings, in our words. It is a comprehensive meaning. That is why Mufassirin, including Allama Tabatabai in Tafsir al-Mizan, he says that the meaning of La ikraha fi deen, there is no compulsion in deen, is not to say that there is no compulsion in religion. Instead, what Allah is saying is that deen in its essence is something that does not admit compulsion. If deen meant your outward affirmation of a certain principle, then you can probably scare me or bribe me or threaten me into saying whatever you want. And it might even be permissible in Islam if I need to do so to save my life. If deen is an outward affirmation, then compulsion is possible. And we will ask the question, are you allowed to force somebody or are you not allowed to force somebody to say something, to affirm something? In other words, the question of compulsion is a reasonable question. And you might answer that it's immoral to force somebody to believe something, to say something, to affirm something. Believe something in a public way. If deen meant practice, then it is certainly possible to threaten or bribe or cajole a person into practicing a certain way of life. And then the question is reasonable. Is that allowed or is that not allowed? But deen means that which is your orientation within life. From the innermost recesses of your heart, at the border between your conscious and your subconscious, all the way through all of your conscious beliefs and all of the effects of what you believe in your thoughts, in your expressions, and in your actions. And when deen enters that depth of your inner being, then it's not even possible to ask the question of is it permissible to force and compel, or is it not possible to force and compel? Why? Because your inner heart cannot be compelled. It's something that nobody has access to other than yourself. And your willpower and your sense of responsibility before your conscience and before your Creator. And so, La ikraha fi deen does not mean there is no compulsion in religion. Because religion, in that social aspect, or in that public aspect, or even in the individual aspect of what we affirm and what we do, is something that admits social pressure, and social or legal compulsion. But deen is something which does not admit that compulsion at all. So there's no reason to ask, is it permissible to compel it or is it not permissible to compel it? If it's not possible for it to be compelled, then the question of whether you're allowed to do it or you're not allowed to do it doesn't arise. Within the Quranic concept, the question of deen is a question of your direction and your orientation in life. And so it is a very profound concept that shows itself in your actions and in your doings within life. So, just very briefly, فَأَقِمْ وَجْهَكَ لِلدِّينِ حَنِيفًا does not refer to a particular religion or just a set of doctrines or just a set of laws and practices. It incorporates all of that to say that your orientation and your being should be to serve Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that is the essence of deen. And then Allah says that deen is fitrah. فِطْرَةَ اللَّهِ الَّتِي فَطَرَ النَّاسَ عَلَيْهَا. So what is fitrah? Often we translate fitrah to mean your nature or your disposition. And then if we say that Islam is a fitri religion, the question arises, why is it that the majority of humanity is not Muslim? And not everybody who is not Muslim is an evil person, deliberately rejected. But many people, they are exposed to Islam, at least in the general sense. They might not be exposed to the true meaning and the true beauty of the religion, but they are confronted with it and they are not convinced. So if Islam were equal to fitrah, and if religion were fitrah, then you would expect that the majority of people, at the very least the majority of people who have heard of Islam, would accept it. So obviously fitrah cannot just be your disposition or your nature. Generally, things that are part of our instincts, part of our nature, part of our disposition, it isn't difficult for us to accept them. And so here again, we have to distinguish between fitrah and instinct and nature. Nature is something that applies even to objects within this world. They have a certain nature or they have certain properties. And those properties can be measured. They can be observed through our senses. And we can look at the elements of the physical world. We can distinguish the properties of one gas from the properties of another gas. One might be flammable and one might not. One might be stable and one might be unstable. They might have different physical properties. So a tabi'ah or a nature or properties, that is something that exists for everything within creation. One step above that tabi'ah or that nature is what is known in Arabic as ghariza, or we can translate it as instinct. Instinct applies to those things that are alive and that have an intentionality in their actions. So animals will also have a certain instinct. They will have a certain nature that is beyond the nature of inanimate objects. That is beyond the nature of a rock or a blade of grass. Because they seek certain things. And they seek those things with their intention and with their desire. There are certain animals that are carnivorous. They hunt their prey. There are other animals that will not seek meat because that is not in their nature. But all animals will have an instinct that when they are hungry, they will seek the food or the sustenance that Allah has decreed for them. And so that is part of human beings and part of all other animals. And that nature or that instinct is what some people confuse for fitrah. But there is a distinction between fitrah and that instinct. And I explained it in a little bit of detail because I want to draw that distinction. Fitrah is not your nature or your instinct to say that when I'm hungry, I look for food. When I'm thirsty, I look for something to drink. When I'm tired, then I need rest. And just like an animal will look for shelter, a human being also has that natural desire to find a home, to acquire property in order to be able to meet their needs and meet their wants. And all of those things are part of our ghariza, they are part of our instinct. But the fitrah is something above that, and more sublime than that, and not limited to that. Sallallahu Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. And if you want to get an inkling of what fitrah represents, then you can do that by looking at the two different concepts that have been paired with deen. So, in this verse that I recited, Allah says, أَقِمْ وَجْهَكَ لِلدِّينِ حَنِيفًا فِطْرَةَ اللَّهِ الَّتِي فَطَرَ النَّاسَ عَلَيْهَا. So, deen is fitrah. And then the attribute of deen and the orientation that Allah wants us to have, which we know of as the religion of Islam, is also called in the Quran دين الحق. هو الذي أرسل رسوله بالهدى ودين الحق ليظهره على الدين كله. Allah sent His messenger with guidance and the true religion so that it can overcome all other religions, or so that it can overcome all orientations or all beliefs, doctrines, laws. He said that was comprehensive meaning, so that it can overcome all deen. The fact that Islam is going to triumph under the banner of the Imam of our time, Hujjat ibn al-Hasan al-Askari alayhi salatu wasalam, is not a factor of a military victory. It's not because there is going to be a battle and the enemy is going to be defeated by superior weapons or superior strategy. It is because the religion of Islam is Deenul Haq. It is truth. It is depth. It is profundity. It is light. And when light comes, then the shadows and darkness, they disappear by their very nature, not because they need to be defeated. And so when we see that deen is associated with fitrah, and deen is associated with the concept of haqq, or truth, or reality, then we can begin to associate fitrah with truth or reality. In other words, fitrah is that part of your disposition, or that part of your nature that is in line with the deeper meaning and the deeper reality of your existence. It's not just your instinct. It's not just your desire to get food when you're hungry. That exists in any animal or any existing being within this world. It moves towards its instinctual or its dispositional goal. But fitrah is that which aligns you with a deeper truth. And so it needs to be developed, and it needs to be worked on. It can't just be discovered. It can't just be uncovered on a superficial level. To use one example, what does freedom mean? Freedom, if you just look at the level of instinct, is not to have somebody tell you what to do. So your average teenager when they rebel against their parents, what is the conception of freedom that they have in their mind? I don't want my mom telling me when I have to eat or clean my room or do my chores or do my homework or wake up or do my prayers or whatever it might be. The conception of freedom is simply one of not having any restriction, not having any foreign or any outside force pressuring you or compelling you to do something. But then does that change as you grow up? All of us, we go through a rebellious phase within our lives. That rebellious phase is because that is a stage of human development. If we are raised well and Allah blesses us, we will not use that rebellious phase, however, to throw away the benefit that we get from our parents, even when they're sometimes a little overbearing and a little bossy and a little nosy about our affairs. We will see that desire to throw away that outside compulsion in a way to develop an inner understanding of what our needs and our obligations are. And as you become a more intelligent person, and that comes through experience, it comes through education, it comes through contemplation, and in particular, it comes through faith. Sometimes a person might be 70 years old, and they still live with that childish teenage rebellion within their heart. So they can't stay married to anybody, they can't stay friends with anybody, they can't have a meaningful relationship because even though they've had experiences, and they might be highly educated, but they still don't want to be bound. And so they say that I don't want to get married because I want my freedom. Education and experience are not sufficient. But if you have some contemplation and some introspection and the blessing of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then you will eventually realize that there are certain limitations that exist on you because you are a human being. And true freedom comes from recognizing those human needs and those human limitations and living the best life you can in view of your humanity. Not by escaping from all responsibility, but sometimes it is by committing yourself, by sacrificing yourself, that you find a level of freedom and a level of happiness that that teenager can never get by running away from any responsibility or any freedom. So both of them are looking for freedom, but one person is looking at that freedom just at the level of instinct because their intellect and their soul is not developed to know anything beyond it. And then another person is looking at it at a level of the aql and the Islamically informed intellect, which knows that true freedom comes from knowing who you are, what your limitations are, and where your true satisfaction and tranquility and happiness lies. And then in fulfilling that role, you will find peace. And you will find freedom of a sort that you cannot get by even all of the power and all of the wealth that exists in this world. Fitra, then, is not just that desire for freedom. That is one very superficial stage. Fitra is that gradual and incremental understanding of the reality. And the better you understand that reality, the more in touch you are with your fitra. So it requires struggle. But if you engage in that struggle, then over time you will find that the pieces of your life, they fall together. And a material life is one where you often feel a certain regret and nostalgia for the good old days. Because I'm 40 now, and I can already tell that my physical faculties are on the downswing. Inshallah, it'll be a long, gradual decline. But every day you see one more white hair. You see that you have one more physical task that was easy yesterday, it's not so easy today. And I was never blessed with stunning good looks, but those of you who Allah has blessed with good physical features, you might then regret that the wrinkles are destroying it. And so naturally, that brings a certain amount of dissatisfaction and a certain wistfulness or nostalgia for those good old days. Whereas a life of faith is one that is distinguished by finding increasing fulfillment, increasing happiness, even as you find that your physical abilities and strengths and attractiveness might be on the decline. Why? Because you're deepening your commitments. And so when you're free and carefree, if you just get your first job, you're still living with your parents, they're not asking you to pay rent, then you might be earning minimum wage. But it's all yours. So you can eat out every day. Any college students, they do that. And sometimes they're piling on debt, they don't realize that that's going to come back and bite them before they know it. But you live carefree. And then later on, you might be earning 5 times that amount. But you have bills, and you have responsibility, and you have less disposable income, or less freedom to just do whatever you want than you did before. But you find greater fulfillment because you have more obligations and more responsibilities and more purpose within your life than you did before. That is a person who is increasingly coming into the awareness of their fitrah. So that question that sometimes comes, that if religion is fitrah, why isn't it obvious? The answer is that fitrah is not just instinct. Instinct is obvious. We don't have to have a lengthy debate about whether people have an instinctive desire for good smells, or good foods, or comfortable clothing, or all of the other things that are part of our superficial instincts. We don't have to have a lengthy debate about the nature or the property or the tabi'ah of objects. But fitrah, because it is correlated with haqq, deenul haqq, and depth, it is natural that it's not going to be just obvious, but it is going to be something that requires study and that requires a great deal of effort for us to be able to fully appreciate. You will appreciate one level of your fitrah from the beginning. But then to say that this is the full expression of the fitrah, you have to embark on that journey of righteousness. That is the topic of our discussion. Sallallahu Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. These are difficult questions that we are exploring. So we shouldn't expect the answers to be straightforward, but they're important questions. If somebody were to ask, what is the need for religion? Why is it not enough for us just to be a good person? Then the answer comes in light of the Quranic meaning of deen and the Quranic meaning of fitrah, which is that religion and truth and nature, they are the very essence of existence. Religion is not something that you place as a building upon a foundation of humanity, or upon a foundation of being a good and considerate person. But deen and fitrah are what make you a human being and make you a good person. They are that foundation, as well as everything that is built upon that foundation. Religion is not salat and saum and hajj and zakat. Religion is the orientation of life towards a greater purpose, and then the expression of that orientation in all aspects of my life. And that is why, although there might be a Muslim who is not an honest person, or is not a good person for me to embark on a business transaction with, Islam and the religion of Islam, or the deen of Islam, is something which incorporates all of the attributes of goodness. And the one question that I will address tomorrow, inshallah, is why is it that those attributes of goodness must include salat and saum as well? Why isn't it enough for a person to say kindness to others, charity, and consideration, and being a good person? First question that we ask is, does religion require us to go beyond just humanity and include the totality of our beliefs and our feelings and our actions? And the answer to that question is that Islam is that entirety. But the question remains, what is the significance of the ritual or the law or that part of religion that you cannot get just from your own intellect and your own thinking? Why do we need to add that component to just being friendly and considerate with others? Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. And so that part of the question, inshallah, we will explore further tomorrow. But I want to conclude with one final principle that we should remember. And this is that in a human life, there are many things that are entirely beyond our control. And for many of us, we spend our life trying to get some semblance of control over those things that are beyond our own ability to influence. When we speak of religion being that profundity that is underlying all of creation, one of the effects of that is that our struggle is to align ourselves to the axis, to the direction of existence and creation itself, and not try to pull creation to my interests or my wants. And so sometimes if you make a dua or a prayer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you might have that question that, why is my prayer not answered? We do have a hadith that tells us that sometimes Allah answers a person's prayer on their terms because that person is too simplistic to understand the true meaning of dua. The true meaning of dua is to come to Allah and to say that I recognize that I might have money, but I can't buy my needs. I might have intellect, but I can't think my way out of my needs as a human being. I need your guidance. Oh Allah, I have this understanding of my best interest. I want to pay off my loan. I want to get help. I want my loved one to be cured of their illness. I want to have a child. I want this. But oh Allah, I know that my needs are known to you better than they are known to me. And so the true meaning of dua is not to ask Allah to give you what you want, but to ask Allah to gradually change what you want to what He knows is best for you. In other words, to change your orientation from living life on your terms and ask Allah to give it to you on your terms, to instead telling Allah, if this is what I'm asking you because I know no better, but you give me because you know better on your terms and not on my terms. And if you look at the life of those beloved martyrs and representatives of Islam, you will see that teaching represented at every moment of their lives. I want to draw your attention to just one incident, and we heard very eloquently the final struggle and sacrifice of Muslim ibn Aqil. When he was captured by Muhammad ibn Ash'as, the emissary of Ibn Ziyad, Muslim ibn Aqil began to cry. And Ibn Ash'as said that, "O Muslims, somebody who set out to do what somebody like you set out to do should not cry if they are arrested or if they suffer death." And Ibn Aqil said that, "I'm not crying for myself. إِنَّمَا أَبْكِي لِلْحُسَيْنِ وَلِآلِ الْحُسَيْنِ." I am crying because I was a messenger and I had a mission. And my job was to prepare the groundwork for my master Hasan to come to Kufa and to begin his mission to spread the light of Islam to all corners of the Muslim world, and then from there to the rest of the world. And I see that Allah has decreed something else. If it were my own martyrdom, then I would not shed tears. I have submitted myself to the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But my tears are for the fact that with my martyrdom I see that the mission of Imam Hussein is also going to be a very different mission than the one I had set out for, and I had hoped for, and I had prayed for. Lillahi amrun huwa balighuh. Allah has a plan, and He will attain His plan. I weep because I see before me the martyrdom of my master Hussein. I see the captivity of his family and his loved ones and the descendants of the Prophet. And it is from that moment that in Kufa there played out a Karbala before the events of Karbala on Ashura. The struggle of Muslim was very similar to the struggle of Imam Hussein himself. On the eve of his martyrdom, he prayed Maghrib with 300 followers who were pledged to him. He finished Salatul Maghrib and turned back, and he saw that there were only 30 who remained. He said that, "Let me give you some preparations because we are embarking on a difficult struggle and the time for Isha came." He stood for Isha, and then those 300 who had become 30 were now 10. And then when he finished Salatul Isha and he walked out of the masjid, one by one, even those 10 people began to go by one excuse or another. Let me check on my family, let me check on my children, let me check on my elderly parents. Until Muslim came to one neighborhood known as the neighborhood of Kinda, and he was alone in the darkness of Kufa. He didn't know where to go. He came to the door of an elderly lady. He saw that she seemed to be a pious woman. He said that, "O servant of Allah, O lady, would you be able to provide someone who is without any friends and without any companion a drink of water?" That lady brought a glass of water. She gave it to Muslim. He drank. And then when he had drank, he sat down outside of her house. And Lady Tawa said something which was as if it were an arrow that pierced the heart of Muslim. She said, "Ya Abdullah, irji' ila ahlik." O servant of Allah, go back to your family. And Muslim paused and did not reply. She repeated it the second time, go back to your family. And then the third time she said that Kufa is a dangerous place. Your family might not be safe if you stay here. And Muslim looked up with tears in his eyes. He said, "Oh lady, you seem to be a pious woman. What would you tell a person who has no family and no companion and no one to tell him even which direction he should face? Is it possible for me to ask you another favor? Perhaps one day I will be able to repay you." And that lady saw in the dignity of Muslim that he was no ordinary person. She said, "Who are you?" He said, "I am Muslim ibn Aqil, the ambassador of Hussein." She said, "That come, you are an honored guest. I have very little that I can afford you, but let me provide you whatever I am able." She gave him a room, she brought him dinner, but Muslim did not eat. He said that, "Oh lady, I ask you only for a place where I may pray." She came time and time again and saw that Muslim did not sleep that entire night. Just before Fajr, she came and said that, "Oh Muslim, I saw that you have not been able to sleep. Were my accommodations insufficient? Did I not fulfill my obligation? Did I not sufficiently express my love to my Imam and my master that you were not able to find rest in my home?" And Muslim said that, "Oh Taw'a, I closed my eyes for a few moments, and when I closed my eyes last night, I saw my uncle Amir al-Mu'mineen. He looked at me and he said, 'Oh Muslim, we are waiting for you. We are looking for you in paradise, and very soon we will be reunited. So this is my last night on this world, and like my uncle, I want to leave this world hunger.'" That was near the time of Fajr, and the sound of Ibn Ziyad's soldiers came close to the house of Muslim, the house of Taw'a where Muslim was. He went outside to face the enemy, and he fought bravely until he was surrounded from all sides. 300 soldiers attacked Muslim all at once, and still he defended himself. And he repelled their attack. And every so often he would turn towards the direction of Hijaz, and he would say, "Oh my master, oh my Imam, if your ambassador has failed you, forgive him." And then finally, when blood began to flow from his wounds, and when he was weak, then Muslim said that, "I have one mission, which is to convey a message to Imam Hussein." He put down his sword and he turned towards the enemy. He said, "Can I make a will? Can a message be passed to the Imam that he is not to come to Kufa because they have not fulfilled the pledge?" The enemy did not carry out that will of Muslim. But narrations tell us that when Muslim went to the roof of the governor's castle and the sword came near his head and he turned towards Hijaz one last time and he said, "Assalamu alayka ya Aba Abdillah." By a miraculous manner, Allah made His own voice be His own messenger. And from his journey, Imam Hasan stood up and said, "Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. Assalamu alayka ya Muslim. Ashhadu laqad wafayt." You have fulfilled your pledge, and that mission, that message that Muslim wished to convey to the Imam, it reached the Imam by his own lips and in his own voice. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala count us among the followers and the true lovers of Ahlul Bayt in this world and the hereafter, and never separate us from Muhammad wa ali Muhammad so long as we live. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.